even early on, the way that B2B buyers would get information and prefer to learn was shifting, even that side. It's continued to advance.
Everything that we do has to be authentic and actually deliver real value. It's peer-to-peer recommendations, right? We can't control the narrative there.
B2B buyers are going to do 94%, maybe more than that, percent of their buying process without a one-to-one interaction with your company.
If you did have a product that was trained, let's say it's Chris Walker, it was trained on all of your information and it spit it out, then the question becomes, do they use that to train their models?
If you are a true entrepreneur and you're going for it, you cannot have the safety net.
Hi all, welcome to another episode of Pulse brought to you by Intuji. I'm Julian Wallis and today we're zeroing in on the transformation of B2B buying behaviour and what this means for businesses trying to stay ahead. Joining us is none other than Chris Walker, the CEO of Pasetto and the Executive Chairman at Refined Labs. Chris is at the forefront of B2B marketing, leading the charge with innovative strategies that speak directly to today's buyers. With his finger on the pulse of the B2B world and 150,000 followers on LinkedIn, Chris has invaluable insights into how B2B buying behaviour is evolving and what businesses can do to adapt. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Julian, awesome to be here. Also, shout out to you, making the arrangements from wherever you're located to do the podcast at midnight your time. Really appreciate that, and really going to bring some energy and make it worth your while. So looking forward to getting into it.
No, absolutely. I appreciate you jumping on for one of our first few episodes. So for those of you that don't know you, just give us a bit of a background about yourself and what you do.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name's Chris Walker. I've been a B2B professional since I graduated college in 2012 and have been in B2B my whole career. First 7 years as an employee inside of B2B companies, and then the last 5 years owning my company, Refined Labs, and being the founder and CEO of that company for the last 5 years, which is a B2B digital demand agency. And then recently started a software company off the core insight that I believe that established B2B companies have brilliant people, esteemed investors, incredible products, happy customers, and what they're really lacking is holistic go-to-market data in order to inform the team about what to do. And I think that having data would allow these really smart, talented people to make what should be fast, easy, simple decisions in a much more confident and strong way. So looking forward to continuing to pursue that to help B2B companies continue to advance on this path.
Awesome. I've obviously been following your content for quite a while, and a lot of what you share, etc., on LinkedIn and a lot of your, I suppose, philosophies and methodologies I very much align with, and it aligns with what we're trying to do at Intuji and by, launching this podcast. And we've got a few things going on behind the scenes with video creation of behind the scenes content, etc. But I don't want to get too much into that now. I more want to pick your brains around, the modern B2B buyer and understanding that, kind of firstly understanding like how you've seen B2B buying evolve in recent years and kind of what you've seen over the time that you've had Refined Labs and since you've been in the space.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, these shifts, you could notice them starting to happen in the early 2010s. Like I remember standing in the trade show booth in 2013 and like wondering what the ROI of this investment is and having surface level conversations with some person that happened to stumble by our booth, and then have the sales team say that, these trade show leads or these webinar leads aren't good and have to go out and find their own cold prospects and do their own cold thing. And so you could just see even early on, the way that B2B buyers would get information and prefer to learn was shifting, even that side. It's continued to advance mainly through the scale and evolution of the internet that's created a phenomenon called dark social. B2B buyers get information in tons of places that don't create intent data and don't get tracked by touchpoint-based attribution, podcast and content platforms, YouTube, social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, private communities in a Slack or a Discord or a LinkedIn group or a Facebook group, Reddit threads, third-party events that your company doesn't get that data from. So like hosting a webinar like I'll do in a couple of hours and speak to hundreds of B2B marketers and probably talk about tech and problems and tools. The company that has those tech problem tool solutions is not going to be able to track the impact that I make to that audience. Direct word of mouth, text message, phone calls, all these different things. And the core insight here is that in 2012, a B2B buyer had access to none of those things.
Yeah.
Zero. If they were lucky, they had a couple of people's phone numbers in their industry that they met at a conference once in a while, or they would aggregate at a conference every 6 to 12 months and talk shop about their profession. And then they would carefully peruse the trade show booth because B2B companies didn't invest in digital, didn't have good buyer enablement on their website. And so they had to go to the booth to actually discover things.
Yeah.
All that stuff is just entirely out the window now. And so the reality in 2012, what could B2B buyers do? Talk to your sales team, go to a trade show, search in Google. And today, where can they get information? Trillions of places that they trust a lot more than those three things: your sales rep, the Google algorithms, and things like that. And so they're going to go and take the path of least resistance to the sources of information they trust the most. I started to recognize this in 2016. I did a survey of 500 of our target accounts. I worked at a company. We sold into hospitals and medical centers and things like that. I took our gold and silver accounts. I the people, the decision makers inside of that. I ran a survey to them. I asked them things like, who are the sources of information that you trust? And then I gave them 10 options. And I said, rank them from the most trustworthy to the least trustworthy. What did B2B buyers say? The least trustworthy source, a sales rep. The most trustworthy source, the people that they hear at the conferences. And all the things in between. And as you could just see that the places where B2B buyers get information are not the places where we're marketing. We're not the places where we're investing, and not the places where we're focused on. We focus on all the places that they trust the least.
Yeah.
And so I think that is actually the core insight about how B2B buying has changed. The traditional sort of like measurement playbook and the way that companies measure MQLs and touch point based attribution and all this other nonsense keeps them stuck in the same way that they ran marketing 10 years ago now, just to appease their measurement. And they just get stuck in there. And if you just took it and said, okay, this is an interesting input that we get from digital attribution, but let's go talk to our customers and see what our customers say, and have two entirely different dimensions of data that you're looking at to drive your strategy, you just realize that what customers say is very different than how we're investing and what we're measuring.
Yeah. Definitely very, very, very interesting. I want to probably touch off on some points. Obviously, you are very familiar with the B2B marketing side, and obviously dark social and everything around that there. And I do want to understand your perspective on that, and what role you feel like digital platforms such as LinkedIn play in kind of the modern B2B buying cycle. But I also want to get your thoughts on something I haven't seen you talk about as much, which is where B2B companies actually adopting that self-service mentality, which could be from pricing pages, all of that regarding their website, their content, everything that they're putting out, which is enabling the buyers to actually make those decisions and become educated themselves, but right through to kind of where B2B companies are actually adopting technology that enables businesses or their other clients, etc., to actually self-service, such as ordering platforms and that kind of thing, which kind of 10 years ago was that in itself was not even really a thing that was done in the space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. In 2012, there were B2B suppliers that would sell e-commerce, and there are like in supply chain and manufacturing and other things. And there was probably some software companies that were doing the same thing, but it was early. I like distinguishing between buyer enablement and self-service. Buyer enablement, enabling your buyers with the information that they need to make a decision. Self-service, allowing the customer to self-serve and actually transact or get into the product and use something. I see them as two distinct things. I believe in both of them, but let's cover them in each side. Buyer enablement is very obvious and easy, which is that B2B buyers are going to do 94%, maybe more than that, percent of their buying process without a one-to-one interaction with your company, which means that they're going to be on your website, looking at customer stories, going to review sites, messaging peers and communities, talking to other vendors, talking to an analyst firm or a consultant or an advisor that's going to help them make decisions. And they're going to be doing all those things most of the time. And so it's your job to be able to arm your champion and the people that believe in bringing in your product with the information that they need to get people on board internally, whether that's sending them a podcast episode saying this concept is really important, to an ROI calculator, to a customer story of someone like them, a reference, whatever it is, being able to enable your buyers to be able to independently purchase your solution, which is just frankly what they do. And so if you are not providing that information on your own, you're just leaving it up to the other source of information to provide that detail about your company, which could be correct or incorrect and could be negative or positive. On the self-service side, which I see as an entirely different thing, I continue to clarify my perspective and how I feel about this based on the data that I see of a lot of companies that are using this type of motion. And we really need to break this up into two separate categories. You have native product-led companies that start PLG. They usually do not have a sales team. They figure out how to do transactions inside of the product. So they sell inside of the product. It's not just a free trial, and they can do that in self-service ways. And then they grow to a level where they realize eventually they need an enterprise motion. So that's like one category. And then you have the sales native companies that get to 25, 50, 100 million ARR. Maybe they feel competitive pressure in the market or some other dynamic that makes them feel like they need a PLG motion where people can access the product. And these two moves of going from a single move to a hybrid on your website are entirely different. The product-led native companies, I think, will have a much easier time adopting an enterprise motion because it's additive. When you put the button on, in addition to the free trial, it's additive. It's going to give you sales meetings and things that you didn't have before. When you take the company that's sales native and you put the free trial on it, it is not additive. It's actually detractive. It's going to take that you used to get 100 sales meetings a month. Then all those people are going to now go into a free trial where they don't meet with your sales team. And instead of getting 100 sales meetings every month, now you get 10. And then you have 90 other people or more than that lost in the product. And then your sales team is chasing them rather than just having a meeting. The win rates go way down, et cetera. And so we need to be looking at these as two different concepts. And I'm cautioning almost every company that is a sales native right now that's trying to implement a PLG motion, just based on the data that I've seen with companies that have tried it. Even some of the most successful companies and CMOs that I've been able to work with have concluded that doing this is majorly detrimental for years at a time. It delays revenue. It takes meetings away from sales. It lowers conversion rates. It decreases sales productivity. There are dynamics in there. If you start sales-led and add the product-led free trial type of button, there are very detrimental effects that you need to be aware of before you try a change like that, or within 15, 30 days, you're going to be very displeased in the metrics that you're seeing.
Yeah, no, very interesting insights on that one. I suppose that's fairly skipping to the PLG. What you're discussing is pretty heavily SaaS focused. From what I'm hearing, what would you focus on? Let's say on more of a blue collar in industry, or something where a company maybe, let's say for example, wholesaling suppliers or something within the construction industry. Let's just use as an example, where they have been around for 20, 30 years. They've built up a pretty substantial business, but the whole shift in B2B in general, basically digital transformation, but their buying journey is changing, where they've already got an established relationship with the company, but a competitor may be bringing out digital, I suppose, tools to change that buying cycle, and then actually enable them on a repeat order basis where that relationship has already been built, right? That's not like a new customer coming along on a SaaS product. It's someone that's got a relationship.
It's a reocurring purchase.
That's right.
Just like Coca-Cola.
Yeah, something like that. And I suppose, what's your take on that, and where do you see that shifting from your work, and do you have much data around that?
First, I just want to take this opportunity to be able to distinguish between recurring business models and reoccurring business models, which you pointed out. A recurring business model, a customer pays you on a repeated basis, typically monthly, but it could also be quarterly or annually or something like that. And it's contractually obligated that they're going to keep paying you. A reoccurring business model means that your customer has the choice of whether to come back and buy again. Think consumables, CPG, wholesaling, building, construction products. There's a bunch of different things where, in that instance, those companies spend a lot more as a percentage of revenue on marketing, because you have to basically convince the customer to buy again and again and again.
Yeah.
And in SaaS, they use the exact same benchmark of, oh, we'll just spend 12% of revenue on marketing because that's what the Gartner report says that typically references CPG and Fortune 500 brands that are reoccurring businesses, not recurring, and they just frankly overinvest in marketing because you also have the expense in account management and customer success that's driving the recurring purchase. And so it just inflates go-to-market expenses and inflates cost of acquisition and lowers profitability. And then when we think about this example of like, let's look at a wholesale company today, some of the dynamics you need to figure out first: are we a global brand, national brand, local? What is the geography of which we can sell in? I think that ends up becoming a core thing about how you think about your strategy. So let's just say it's a national brand. They can wholesale across the country. It makes the example easier. Then you think about like, what is a modern strategy, a way for us to be able to get to our target customers in a way that they actually consume, which leads them to consider our business. A lot of companies will spend all their time inside of SEM and SEO, and it's just like very competitive, very low ROI in my experience type of endeavor. And so instead, you could be able to go out to all the sites where your customers are using the building supplies and create TikTok videos of all the cool stuff that your customers are doing, and then share them. There are landscaping companies, there are like lawn mowing companies, there's window companies that are all using that play on TikTok. Go out and show the things that your customers are being able to do with your product, and you just be the producer of it, and getting incredible reach and traction, especially with visually aesthetic products like building materials potentially. So that's one strategy. And then you have to figure out how to create a event and community as the core underlying foundation that creates your customer insights. It creates your long form content. It fuels your short form content, and it gives you a feedback loop about what do my target customers actually care about and what is actually resonating. And then you host a weekly event talking about the building supply industry, or even just the profession of a architect or construction or whoever they're targeting, and bring a bunch of smart people together and not be in sales mode all the time, and be talking about the things in the industry and be the way to collect all of your core customers and provide a bunch of value. And then if you're able to dial those things in, then after that, layer on a paid strategy to distribute that information, which you've already validated in real life with customers that you've posted organically that already works, and then start running that stuff on a LinkedIn ad, in a connected TV ad, which by the way works great targeting blue collar workers, and the CPM costs are very reasonable. And that's the type of sort of marketing mix. And then you have to think about the distribution strategy, which I look a little bit differently than like the promotional or marketing strategy, which is like, how are we going to actually transact? Maybe right now people call in and make an order, and your accountant, like, or order entry person, enters the order into your ERP. Like, to making a strategic choice of a business transformation of, we want more accurate data, we want faster time to value, we want a lot of this stuff automated, we want our customers to be able to track it, to make the strategic decision that we are going to now primarily transact through an e-commerce motion, where we have our catalog on the website and people can check out and buy, and they have their account online, and we sell B2B that way. And if the customer still feels comfortable calling, we'll just enter it into our system for them. It's not like they can't do it anymore. But making that choice from a distribution perspective, I think you just almost have to start working toward that from a just business efficiency and business strategy standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. And just on that, what we're seeing on our projects, right? That's our main focus, is helping building out those customer experiences, those digital customer experiences, and digital transformation projects. And what we're seeing is a massive increase in retention, with on reoccurring sales, if that makes sense, and a drop in churn rate from customers, because essentially the shift we're seeing is the technology that these companies are building out is becoming their main USP, right? It's becoming part of their selling process, right? Where obviously content, and what we're talking about, where we're actually distributing unique, genuinely informative and authentic content can be shared. That can be another channel, right? So it can obviously be social, that we've talked about already a little bit, and we'll get into a bit later as well. But it also can be kind of a relationship hub for those businesses. And I suppose it leads me on to my next point. essentially around why it's so important, and how businesses can focus on trust and authenticity in today's world without being cliche. But really, we talked about it a bit earlier, where you're saying people have now got millions of ways to get information rather than just, okay, a salesman back 10, 15 years ago. Why is it so important to focus on that? And for a business that is looking to really put that at the forefront of their strategy, how would they do that? Where should they start on really building trust around their brand?
The number one place I would start, which I've done every time to build trust with your brand, is to go and talk to your customers or survey them and understand who are the top 5 or 10 people or, groups or programs or communities do they trust the most? And then use that as your target list for the top first 10 events or podcasts or things that you run, and bring those people that your audience trusts the most on, extract the insights for them, frame the questions around what you want your customers to hear from them, and away you go. You got collaboration, you have like some sharing of audience, you have clear trust that's been validated with your customers. More people are going to show up to the events, more people will listen to it afterwards, and it'll give you the shot to deliver enough value where people will come back afterwards, where you can start to produce it. So I think that riding on the coattails, so to speak, of people that have already built a ton of trust with your audience can be a really great strategy as a means to get it started.
Okay.
And then there's another mindset. There's another mindset element, and I have been able to and continue to be able to adopt this mindset that I see just a lot of people miss when they look at this approach. And it's perhaps because I've been doing this for creating content this way in B2B since 2015, 2016. So I've really adapted and developed that muscle. But you are not in sales mode when you're doing this. You cannot be. You cannot be trying to convince someone. You are trying to help people be more successful in their profession. You can help them solve problems for free that normally people would pay you for. You have to be able to have standout, differentiated value that they cannot get elsewhere. And that becomes a very difficult mindset for a lot of people that are trying to do what I do inside of a podcast, because they're wondering when they're going to get their first lead from it.
Yeah.
The second piece is that you cannot think about the podcast in isolation. It is not it's a fuel to create a recurring long form, video and podcast. Ideally, you're doing it on a live event. You get customers live. It fuels all of your social channels, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, if you use Instagram or Facebook. And all of that is stemming from the podcast. And we must look at the results of the podcast as an aggregate around the program, not trying to isolate the distribution channel. I can clearly prove that people listen to our podcast and it drives revenue for us. It's not a complicated thing, but it doesn't have to be that way for everyone. If you have a podcast and you have 500 downloads and nobody's listening to it, and you're like, oh, I think we should shut down our podcast now. Meanwhile, you're using those videos and you have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn and LinkedIn's driving you business. You must recognize that the podcast is fueling that. And so I think people should much more look at a podcast as a means of creating content rather than working dollars that should be scrutinized against the distribution. I think it would just be a huge unlock for people. They pay people to sit, or agencies to sit around and write SEO blogs. It's a much more effective way to create content in the mediums that are mainly consumed on the internet today, which is video content in most platforms. And hopefully LinkedIn figures it out, because they continue to cut my reach on videos while they prioritize text only posts like it's a blog. Well, and I continue to get frustrated because every single other platform sees what's happening, but LinkedIn hasn't been able to keep up with those changes. They've tried to launch features like stories and other things like that, and haven't been able to really figure it out. And I think a lot of it is because how they monetize. The way that LinkedIn monetizes is very different than how TikTok or Facebook would monetize. Sure, they get ad revenue, but LinkedIn over there is a B2B sales team selling recruiter software and sales data and things like that. And I think it creates some conflicting objectives inside of their network about whether they want to create a better social network or create a better B2B sales engine and B2B product. And And so hopefully they continue to adapt to how the world is moving, because I think that video will continue to be the dominating medium on the internet for a long time.
Yeah, great, very very interesting, and I agree with all your points. I think I've got two questions just on that there, which I'll jump into uh, the end bit there to start with, which was I've noticed that as well on my short time creating content on LinkedIn, and it's quite strange that get quite a bit more reach impressions on what I would say is a much more lower effort text post, right? Maybe with an image versus a video that has quite informative content. It could be up like 5 minutes long, right? And it has great engagement in regards to retention, where people are watching it for quite a long time in regards to how many people have actually seen it, but it just doesn't get pushed as much. Right? It might actually get more engagement, but the impressions seem to be lower from my end. So I find that quite interesting, what you've said there.
What a typical social network is going to measure in terms of like a North Star metric is the amount of time that someone spends on the platform per login. So they're trying to optimize for people that watch the whole video and click into the profile and watch another one and different things like that. What LinkedIn is trying to optimize for is how many posts can people see, because we're going to deliver an ad every fourth or fifth post. And so having people scroll through and see 6 ads in one session instead of watch one video, spend 5 minutes and say, I'm going to log out and actually even never consume an ad. It creates a competing objective inside of the platform, which is different than many other social networks. I'm not saying it's right or wrong for LinkedIn to do it. They've built an amazing business. I've benefited a lot from the platform. This is more so to help them. You can see that attention that used to really, really, really sit on LinkedIn is flowing other places, private communities, TikTok, YouTube, whether it's shorts or long form. And as a platform, they need to be able to be consumer centric and figure out how to deliver the stuff that people want. I scroll through my feed and see so much garbage.
Yeah.
And then you can move right over to TikTok, and because of the interest-based algorithm and how much effort they put into it, every single thing that I get served is something that I want. And it's just there's quite a bit of difference in how these platforms operate.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. One question I've got for you is, obviously, it's for someone that can't see the whole dark social thing, content creation, just being authentic, sharing all of that, especially when you've got larger, let's call them legacy companies, right, which may have been very successful, right, over the past even 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And it's kind of, but we've always done it this way and we don't care about that. Or, our customers don't care about that. What's your response to that, especially with someone, I know, through following your own content, one of the big things you say to obviously marketers looking for a new opportunity or something is that it's easier to find a company that's heading in that direction and they want to do it than go there and try and convince them that they need to do it. But for someone that's in that position at the moment and is at a company that might be doing very well, but what do they need to do to I suppose put it to the executive team, or is it how do we convince the executive team, I suppose?
So first off, for all the companies that are listening that sit in that bucket, I have listened to this nonsense at both the executive and the individual contributor level since like 2013. Our customer is different. Our customer doesn't buy that way. There's no way that medical, ER physicians use Facebook. They're too professional. They don't use that platform. What we need to do is we need to have 50 sales reps that are going in, knocking on the doors, becoming buddies with them so we can sell them stuff like we did in ortho in the 90s. And then we need to go to all the trade show booths because that's where they love to learn about stuff. When in reality, they are forced to be at the trade show for continuing education. And really what they want to do is network with their peers the whole time that they're there. And they just go to the sessions to check boxes. And whether it's medical professionals, ER nurses, wastewater treatment professionals, optometrists and ophthalmologists, senior living professionals, cybersecurity people, developers, I've heard it every single time. I hear it over and over again for the past 10 years. And then all you need to do is go out and talk to 10 or 15 of those people that are actually your customer and be curious and don't ask leading questions and listen to what they tell you, and you realize that you have the whole thing wrong and you're making massive assumptions about what your customer wants based on your own subjective opinion instead of actually listening to them and knowing them.
Yeah.
And that straight up, that's what it is. And so like whether it's like just so many assumptions around what our customers want, that just simply going out, like whenever I've wanted to like sort of get a company on, I'm already in there. They don't see the writing on the wall. They don't see the stuff that's very, very clear. It's not about giving them your opinion of, oh, our customers are doing this stuff. It's going out, surveying 500 customers, analyzing the data, presenting it in an accurate way. And then even then, a lot of companies don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And so I totally like as a B2B marketer today, you have two options. You can go and find the, 2, 3, 5% of companies that actually get it. And you're not going to be the head of marketing. You're not going to be the CMO, but you're going to work at a company that gets it. And you're going to learn accelerated learnings for the next 2 years. It's going to create financial and emotional, a financial and professional upside for you for the rest of your career. Or you can go and be the head of marketing at a Series A company that's going to fail in 12 months and not learn anything and be misaligned with the company and be under pressure to do things that don't make sense because the company didn't plan appropriately or raise too much money. And I just think as B2B marketers, and even myself looking back, so this isn't me, this is actually my experience, at a lot of times in my 20s, during my early career, I came up to decisions where I had to either prioritize short-term compensation or learning. And the times where I prioritized short-term compensation, I always got burned. And the times where I prioritized learning, the things always worked out for me and paid 10, 100, 1000x returns 3 to 5 years down the road. And I just think that we need to be looking at our career and our profession and our ability to create like wealth as professionals in a much more long-term view.
Yeah, I totally agree. At the end of the day, I think the way to sum it up is everyone's human, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's B2B, and a lot of this even talk goes to government when you selling to the government. It's like, they don't consume that way, but it's still humans on the other side of the table, or whoever you're dealing with. And so if you can find that channel or distribution to them and your content is actually good and it's authentic, it's going to resonate with them, right? And at the end of the day, there's a decision maker for every single deal, or multiple ones, for example. And I totally agree with you. I want to dive a bit more into the future and get your thoughts on this here. I know you've had some comments and stuff around in your content around AI, and mentioning that you don't think it's going to overall, you don't think it's going to have as bigger impact as people are making out. But I'd like to get your thoughts in regards to mainly around where you see AI generated content going in the B2B space. And obviously we're seeing companies like HeyGen and stuff coming out now, which are creating instant avatars where people can create basically talking head videos and that kind of thing in an instant, scripts. What's your comments on that? Where do you see that going, and do you see a use case for that, or do you just feel it's completely inauthentic and it shouldn't be touched?
Yeah. So first off, just to clarify my perspective on the short term and long term of AI, the long term impact of AI is totally undeniable. It's going to impact our professional and personal lives in ways that we don't even comprehend or understand right now in the long term. But in 2024, the actual impact that it's going to make on your B2B business in 2024, I think that a few companies will figure it out and figure out how to hack 3,000 blogs in 1 week and rank in SEO and find a hack. I'm sure that some companies will, a handful. But for the majority of us, like big companies can't even figure out how to get AI into their company because they don't understand the trademark issues and the intellectual property rights and things like that. And so I just think that the impact that it has on your company and actually in 2024, I think is overhyped. I think that it's not going to have as much impact on the broad set of B2B companies as people think. I think it just takes a lot of time for things to actually like develop and be operational and get proven and get into companies and the legal parts of it figured out. And I just think it'll take longer than people think. When we think about AI generated content specifically, I continue to see like some promise in what's overall happening. And I also see a lot of like really like, I don't know, wasteful use cases of it. The people that are taking AI generated comments and like shoving them into my LinkedIn post, you can immediately tell it's a robot. Like it's not doing you any, I would say it's actually negatively impacting your brand to leave a comment like that sounds like a robot on a post that basically regurgitates exactly what I said. So there's some use cases like that where I think that people are trying to like hack it and it's not working. And then on the AI side, like what I'm interested in, what like if AI could do this, or if anyone is listening to this that has a product that could actually do this, I have been producing video content and audio content for almost the past 6 years, almost like thousands of hours of content. If you could upload all that different stuff and produce it and spit out all of the key topics and all of the blogs and have it all be SEO optimized in my voice because you took my transcripts and then translated it, like that's a real use case there. And so there, like that is possible, but the question is it going to write like me? Is it going to be able to deliver it? Is it going to get you 70% there, 90% there, or 100% of the way there? I think that some of that, taking it from video to a transcript into written, I think is interesting. And then you have the reverse, which wasn't really that possible before, where you could take written and then have some caricature or some other way to explain the concept from written into video, which I think is an interesting one as well for companies that have a body of strong written work, not commodity information, strong written work. And what people don't recognize with either of those use cases is the core thoughts that a human produces is the competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Me having 5 years of video content and podcasts and original thoughts and pushing the boundaries, that's actually the advantage. For a company that's trying to just boot up AI and do the same thing without any information, without thoughts, without consulting 500 companies and seeing their data and having the insights, like, what are you going to do with AI? It's going to write you a bunch of commodity that everyone else has. And so I think that recognizing that AI is a tool to accelerate things that are already working, I think is one of the core distinctions that I'd like to make for people. And almost all technology is like that.
Yeah.
Being able to accelerate things that are already working, not take something that doesn't work and put tech on it and make it work.
Yeah, definitely. That was going to be one of my next points around AIs that you mentioned it there, is that technology kind of accelerates things, but what happens when it will happen, AI becomes mainstream, and I would argue it's not mainstream yet, right? It's still very much in its infancy, but
early minority,
yeah,
early
and
adopters.
Where it's once everyone has access to it, everyone has access to it. That's the status quo now, right? And so, for example, we'll take, if you did have a product that was trained, let's say it's a Chris Walker, it was trained on all of your information and it spit it out, then the question becomes, do they use that to train their models, right? Can other people then utilize that? If not, then obviously that's to yourselves, which is great, but there's a privacy issue there if it is. And if there are models out there that are even using publicly available information, right? Let's say they take it off LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., things like that there, and they're training it and using all of that, then that becomes the status quo. So then what's the next stage of that content creation where, okay, let's say we're in a world where we are producing pretty well good written stuff that's trained and good, text to video, AI generated stuff. I find that fascinating, where it's suddenly that becomes the status quo, and then there'll be other differentiators where it's still, I think probably even more importantly, it's going to come back to more human creativity, and like, okay, well, they're just pumping out thousands of stuff, a month, pieces of content that's all AI, but we know this is human generated, and there's still something authentic about it, right? You can just feel it. I suppose that's what I find really interesting.
Yeah, I think the next wave, and I've actually been talking about this for several years, even in advance of like AI reaching some level of scale and traction, is that as a person now, before it was like let's go and find whatever information is out there, and a lot of that information tended to be good or directionally better than the information that we had on our own. But as information continues to become commoditized, or commodity information continues to be commoditized and used by a lot of vendors, what you need to recognize both as a B2B company and as a person and professional is that what information you listen to becomes one of the key things that you need to distinguish. What sources of information am I going to trust? Because whatever, 50%, 90% at some point are all generated by a robot. When
Yeah.
was that information generated? What were the source? What data around it? Eventually, you're going to realize that it's not about just finding some information. It's about deciding which of these key pieces of information do I trust the most. So I think that's an interesting distinction. And then I just wanted to get one more thing in here, that core networks are able to, whether through some type of analysis or fingerprinting or something, be able to detect AI generated content inside of their platforms and deprioritize it. TikTok already does it. Google already does it. And so consider like what these platforms will continue to do to be able to like sort of do what's best for their customer, and also to create some level of awareness around it. This is a topic where I don't know where it's going to go. I'm not sure how these platforms will react, but right now they are being able to flag them and deprioritize them.
Yeah, definitely, certainly. And I don't personally, I don't see it getting to a point where we have the enough development in the AI space any time in the short term to where it's becoming enough to replicate, I would say, talking head videos and more B2B content, if that's the way I want to put it. Now, we might be able to replicate things like, I don't know if you've seen Sora, like the OpenAI video model or the text-to-video model that they've released, and some of that is pretty incredible, like what they've done, but it's more what I would say is generic stock footage kind of thing, where it's generating that stuff. And I think, without getting into the technicalities of it, that there is easier to crack than something where someone is a personality, right? It's a brand. It's something where it has someone has their own voice, like yourself, etc., where it's got much more nuance than just, okay, I want to see X, Y, and Z down a road or something like that. There, it's a lot more difficult to replicate than that. I now wanted to move into maybe some more around the digital transformation and what you see that impact having on the B2B buying journey, where we talked about a little bit earlier, where you mentioned you were distinguishing between the buyer enablement and self-service, and I'm focusing probably more on the self-service side around here, where companies are adopting that. We talked about, obviously, people ringing up to place orders, and we're seeing that a lot with our clients, where that's kind of the projects where they're coming to us, where it's more legacy, older businesses that have never really embraced digital transformation. They might have an ERP in place and an outdated CRM or something like that, but they're really wanting to hone in on getting quality data. And this is one of the things I wanted to get more insight from you on, is that you talk a lot about getting data from your customers and surveying them, and obviously getting that data. But what about businesses collecting data and providing that back to the customers in a B2B environment, where we talked about that reoccurring sales cycle and where businesses are selling consumables, etc., but actually empowering customers themselves with data around what they're doing with that business and their relationship?
Like what kind of data? Like how many parts they're ordering, or what frequency, or like what?
Yeah,
What do
so
you
things like that there. So even so categories they may have spent in, their comparison to other, let's say, customers within a certain area, might be stats where they may be down on a certain thing, not necessarily around just, hey, you need to be buying more, you're down on this here, but providing, I suppose, insightful data to where they can actually make decisions about their business. And again, it becomes a part of the actual client's selling point to their customers to say, well, we've got this platform, we've got this, and this is the benefits you get out of it by actually working with us. And at the end of the day, it's the whole idea behind it is self-service, really.
Yeah, I think any company that can a B2B company that can figure out the Spotify wrapped version for their B2B customer will be highly successful, being able to personalize and ingest the data that's being produced and then be able to create some level of an output that's entertaining and something that people might want to share and things like that. I think that that's a good North Star when you think about this particular instance. And then SaaS companies just realizing that that they could be a data company just as much as a SaaS company at this point. Most software companies don't prioritize it, so they don't really structure the data. They don't try to standardize the data, and they don't think about it that way because they think like a software company, which is totally fine. And some companies will spit out like a blah 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 labs type of division with two people in it that look at their customers' unstructured, unstandardized data and try and create insights and benchmarks from it as a way to do content marketing and try and acquire new customers. But I think actually leaning in and thinking about how are we able to use this data to develop clear scientific benchmarks for our customers if we can. Do we want to prioritize that as a business or not? Are we able to use different signals that we get because we have 200 companies' data all coming into one place that we're able to produce other types of insights? I think that those become both data security and confidentiality challenges, as well as real opportunities for companies that are able that collect and store that type of data.
Yeah, there definitely, and I agree on that one. Just jumping a bit more into dark social. Do you mind giving us a bit of an overview and anyone listening as to kind of a summary of dark social and its relationship to B2B, I suppose?
Dark social, through the scale and the maturity of the internet, it's created tons of different content distribution channels and methods of sharing information and communicating directly with peers and people that you trust that don't get tracked by attribution software and don't create account level intent data. There's tons. I'm not going to go off of the examples again that we talked through earlier, but there's tons of different places that happen on the internet, potentially thousands at this point. And to recognize that those are all the places that your customers trust the most. And why? Because they get information directly from their peers and thought leaders and people that they trust more than your company's website or a sales rep or even review sites that have become more of a marketing tactic than a buyer enablement thing. And so they would rather go into a community and say, hey, I'm thinking about this vendor. What's your experience been? And get 10 answers from other executives that they trust, rather than trying to search that same thing on Google and get a bunch of sponsored type of information that they believe is less trustworthy. And that's the core fact, is that B2B buyers did not have access to any of this information, which is why they did the things that they used to do: go to Google, go to trade shows, talk to your sales rep.
Yeah,
And now that this information is available, social networks have come on, and for B2B in particular, have dramatically accelerated through the COVID cycle. Um, a B2B professional that holds a $10 million plus budget, that used to never go to watch a LinkedIn live, never listened to a podcast, wasn't involved in communities, never logged into LinkedIn in 2019, now likely does 3, 5, 7 of those different things where they get information in places that they used to not. And if you're not in those places as a company, you're just at a serious disadvantage. You're just at a serious disadvantage sitting there in Google, hoping that someone searches the category of your product so you can pay $57 for a click for a customer that you win less than 0.1% of the time.
yeah,
And it just becomes highly inefficient. And companies are starting to see that. We work with a lot of companies that have been able to spend their way through it for a long time, and given the pressure in the economy and the focus on profitability and the rule of 40, or some people thinking about the rule of 50 now, that you can't just be wasting $5 million a year on Google ads that don't work anymore with measurably low ROI. You just can't do that stuff anymore. And the reality is that a lot of companies do it. And because of the way that the data is produced, it's not like your paid search manager sucks. It's not like the director of demand gen doesn't get it. Even so, it's not like your agency sucks. It's that the executives in the company have created a measurement framework that allow these things to happen and incentivize these behaviors. It is the executive team's fault.
Yeah.
And so I like making that distinction because a lot of people think, oh, like our paid search ROI is bad. Let's fire our whole demand gen team, or let's fire our paid search manager. Let's fire our agency. And the reality is, you told those people what to optimize for.
Mm.
For years, you let the metrics run and you looked at the reports and you didn't change them and you allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if we want to be able to do some of the things that we talk about in dark social and break free from the handcuffs of Google, where we just spend 60% of our marketing budget on SEO and SEM, if we want to break free from those handcuffs, we have to change the way that we look at measuring our go-to-market. It's
Yeah.
a pure requirement.
Yeah, definitely. And there's obviously parts of dark social that we can influence. And this is, I try and explain my thought as clearly as possible here, but we want to be where people are consuming here, where LinkedIn, etc., with creating this content, and we want to be as authentic as possible. But I know you mentioned this here in across your content. If you've got a bad product, a bad service, or a bad company, this ain't fixing that, right? And that's part of that. So everything that we do has to be authentic and actually deliver real value, because there's still going to be parts of this where you talk about Reddit threads and other things, which is it's peer-to-peer recommendations, right? We can't control the narrative there.
Yeah, and I want to like sort of double click because like when we're doing this, this is not like fluffy, let's go and like let's just be authentic and just try and like be nice and like provide value and help people. We need this to help our customers understand why they need to make changes inside of their business.
Yeah.
And we are able to do that in an objective, data-driven way that is not salesy. But the objective here is to get our target customers to want to buy whatever we're selling. That's the goal. And being able to do that in a way where having expertise in what these customers are doing, the issues that they face, the patterns that they see, the data that they measure, that's all of the stuff that creates the content of why people listen to my content and listen to my show. It's because I'm in there with CMOs and RevOps leaders and sales leaders and demand gen leaders, looking at how they're forecasting and planning, looking at their cost of acquisition by channel, looking at how they're building these like quarterly reports and like and propping up some things that are clearly not working through like different types of measurement models that skew it. I'm watching them do all of these things. I'm seeing the patterns of what's happening, and then I'm communicating that back to the market. And what do you know? It resonates with the market because it's real. It's true. There's date like
Mm.
it's not an opinion of what the market is going to do or what's happening in the future. It's the experience and the pattern recognition of what is happening right now. And so if you don't have an insights engine into what your customers are doing, what they care about, what problems they're having, and creating, new solutions for it, then the content is not going to land at the same level.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different dynamics inside of the content, but I want to make that a core point. Like, we are not just showing up here like rainbows and sunshine, having a good time talking to people. We must be communicating a business message that drives people to think about and consider changing what they're doing inside of their company.
Yeah. At the end of the day, actually, as you say, just creating genuine insights and laying it out, saying, here's what we need to do, here's what you need to do, and here's the data to back that up. And it's essentially, it's selling itself. It's not about creating content. And this is where I know this, back earlier on in our company, had the wrong mindset around, okay, you're creating content to sell, right? If that's the idea behind every piece of content, if you're going, how can we get the most leads out of this, or how can we, what are we going to do to actually sell the customer? It's probably doomed to fail from the start. I don't know if you've got any comments on that, but
I mean, this might be in a different direction, but like, by the way, I don't expect anyone listening to this to ever take any of my advice. I'm not telling anyone what to do. I don't even think that I'm right. I don't think that there is a right or wrong. I'm communicating the things that I see. Smart people will see them too. They'll recognize that I have insights that they didn't have and be able to capitalize on that. But I'm not thinking that anyone should be actually taking my advice. I'm putting the information that I see out there. I'm doing it with the intent of helping smart people see the same things that I'm seeing over and over, to be able to help some people win. And so I think that's a core distinction too, because while I have a ton of confidence and a lot of conviction in the things that I'm seeing, I do not expect anyone to take my advice. And I learned that very clearly inside of the consulting work that I do and the things that I've been doing for the past 5 years. Even people where I've like made I'm probably the number one most impactful person on their career trajectory, from manager to CMO, or from VP of marketing to big shot CMO or something like that, where some of the things that I provided gave them the light bulb to get there. And then I provide new advice now and they don't take it. And so, I don't expect them to. They're going to do what's best for them and things like that. And they have to see the things for themselves at the time that's right for them. But some of that stuff just is like sort of fascinating to me.
Yeah, certainly. It's very interesting. Well, I appreciate the insights you've provided us. It's been a great chat, been great learning experience for me, and a lot of insights for us to to take back within our own company, within Intuji. So I appreciate that. We've got kind of a finale segment that I would like to do, and with each guest, and ask you a couple of questions. And the first one is, what's one thing you believe businesses are not paying enough attention to right now that will be critical in the next 5 years?
What their customers actually say.
Okay. Unpack that a bit more for us. So they're not researching enough, they're not surveying enough, and that even if they are, they're just not paying attention to it.
B2B companies have a product marketing function or a product management function, and that'll go out there and research what features people want and how much they might be willing to pay, and they'll launch a beta to see if people like the feature. And then they'll have a brand team that sends a survey out there that asks a bunch of questions that are not useful about like, what does this brand mean to you, and da 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 da. And when it comes to the go to market, how do we actually communicate a message to our customer and sell in a way that they want and deliver in a way that they want? We are just not taking enough real insights from our customers to be able to craft that narrative. What do we do instead? We look at metrics from Salesforce. We listen to what an ABM vendor told us. And we look at what attribution software says about how good Google is working. And that's how we decide what we're going to do in our go-to-market. And we just need a far more balanced view, where I think most B2B companies struggle in go-to-market based on those two core data points. We need accurate, complete Salesforce or CRM performance data, and we need accurate, comprehensive, complete insights from our customers about their buying process, what sources of information they trust, different things like that. And then pairing those two things together to be able to build a real strategy based on data. I think that's where we want to get to, but I think that most companies do not listen to their customers nearly enough. And if they did, they would stop doing a lot of the stuff that they do, like hide pricing on their website, or have an SDR call in between the call with the sales rep, so that between someone submitting a demo request and actually getting a demo, it takes 2 or 3 weeks. And they would just stop doing dumb like that. But so when you ask and they would stop advertising, and they would stop spending money in the places they do if they listen to what customers said. And so I think there's just some clear places where what companies do versus what their customers would tell them are clearly misaligned.
Very, very interesting. The next one is, what legacy do you want to leave in your industry? Like, how do you hope your work will influence or shape the future in your space?
I fundamentally changed how B2B companies go to market, how they measure, how they execute, how they plan and forecast, to just fundamentally shift it. We've been in this demand waterfall MQL model since 2004. It continues to run. You can see the wheels falling off the bus as companies continue to try and force fit this like model from 2004 that got updated in 2011, that got updated in 2018 into this account-based integrated way, and just watching it completely fall flat. That will develop the new operating model and data model and analytics system that companies will use to run their go-to-market, that will incentivize the right customer-focused behaviors, will flag when things are going wrong quickly, and allow B2B executives to make smart, confident decisions fast. And almost none of that stuff is true today.
Yeah, I think you're well on the way to that. So absolutely. The final one is, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
if you want to be an entrepreneur, you can't have a job.
Okay.
You can't have the safety net. I started 2 companies while I was an employee as a side hustle. They made 200, 300K in revenue, 40% gross profit. You know what I mean? You're pulling in an
Yeah.
extra 50K a year maybe, and you get some tax benefits around it on top of your $90,000 a year job. But because you have the job and you put 40 hours a week or something like that into that, so you're only putting 10 hours a week into the side hustle, that the odds of your 50K getting to 500K so you can say this job are basically zero. And so you cannot have this if you are a true entrepreneur and you're going for it, you cannot have the safety net of a
100%
job. You need
commitment.
to have the true space, 100% commit. It doesn't mean that you're going to be successful every time. It might mean that it's 6 months that you've started to deplete your savings. You have to take a mortgage out on your house, and you say, I can't do this anymore because I've created the life conditions that don't allow me to be able to just waste money or like keep burning money on this thing that isn't making me any money. Um, and so it's not that you're going to succeed every time, but if you really want to go for it, and there's a lot of people out there that are thinking about like, hey, like I'm thinking about taking on one consulting client for like 3K a month while on top of my job, or like, hey, I'm kind of thinking about whether I should go get a job or like try and, start up this type of business. And the advice every time is pick a path, realize that if the path doesn't work, you can always take the other one 6 months from now and go out and get after it. And I think to really have the shot of your entrepreneurial venture succeeding, that you cannot have the safety net. And I did the entrepreneurial thing from 2012 to 2019, and it was just a small supplementary income. And then within 3 months of me taking out that safety net, I was making $50,000 a month in recurring revenue, just because all of the constraints and all of the time and all of the mind share and the security of just getting a paycheck every week from someone all go away, and you actually go out and do the things that you need to do. Could not stress it enough. I think that everything happens for a reason in my life. So I think that the time I went off on my own and started doing that was the right time for me. I needed the experience before that to be ready. That's just my belief in how the world works. But for some other people out there that are thinking about it right now, and maybe there's 1 or 2 people out there that get some value out of it and go and make the change, knowing that if it doesn't work out, it's fine. You're like a talented, capable person. If it doesn't work out in 3 months, you'll be able to get another job. You'll be able to go and get the same job that you would now, and probably have a ton more experience. And then there's a high likelihood that you are able to figure out how to make 10 or 15K a month, and then you just don't need the job. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, thanks once again for joining the podcast. It's much appreciated. It's been a great chat. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you once again for jumping on. If you've enjoyed today's chat, for anyone listening and want to dive deeper into this, you can jump on to our learning center at intuji.com. There's a few more resources and materials there that you can get access to. And thanks once again, Chris. It's been great to have you. And appreciate you joining again. We'll no doubt have you on again in the future. So thanks again.
Thanks, man. Really great to be here. Appreciate you staying up late. It was a great episode. Thanks for persevering with us.
No worries at all. Chat again.
All right. See you. Thank you.